Today, we'll examine a 1978 Jehovah's Witness book designed specifically for children. This publication represents a fascinating case study in how religious materials are crafted to appeal to young minds. In this segment, we continue our examination of My Book of Bible Stories, focusing on how emotionally charged narratives, from the angel's visit to Mary to the crucifixion, are simplified and reframed to shape young minds. This part reveals how the book uses idealized imagery, guilt-based messaging, and in-group dynamics to reinforce obedience, discourage questioning, and establish lifelong emotional dependence on organizational authority. The story of Angel Gabriel visiting Mary demonstrates sophisticated emotional manipulation through its presentation. The narrative is stripped of complexity and presented with idealized imagery that appeals to children's imagination. By simplifying this theological encounter into a child-friendly format, the book creates an emotional foundation that makes complex religious concepts seem natural and unquestionable to young minds. In the Nativity narrative, we see how the story is carefully reframed for maximum emotional impact on children. The familiar elements of Jesus' birth are presented in a way that creates immediate emotional connections. The simplified storytelling approach encourages young readers to accept the narrative without question, establishing patterns of unquestioning acceptance early in their religious education. The wise men's story reveals significant alterations from traditional biblical accounts. The narrative is reshaped to instill wariness of outside influences, with the wise men's role modified to serve organizational messaging. This manipulation of Scripture demonstrates how historical accounts can be reshaped to create specific emotional responses in young readers. The temple story featuring young Jesus is transformed into a lesson about obedience and compliance. The narrative emphasizes Jesus' relationship with authority figures, using this biblical account to establish expectations of unquestioning obedience in young readers. The story's presentation creates a clear model for children to follow in their own interactions with religious authority. In the temple cleansing account, we see how righteous anger is used to instill fear of questioning authority. The narrative is shaped to reinforce organizational control by presenting consequences for challenging established religious structures. This creates a powerful psychological barrier against questioning or doubting organizational teachings. The Samaritan woman's story is carefully crafted to establish clear boundaries between those inside and outside the religious group. The narrative creates distinct in-group and out-group dynamics, reinforcing the idea of organizational isolation as both natural and necessary. This psychological separation is presented through simplified storytelling that children can easily understand. The mountain teaching narrative demonstrates how complex theological concepts are simplified to establish unquestioning acceptance of organizational interpretation. The story is presented in a way that positions the organization as the sole authority for understanding religious truth, discouraging independent thinking or alternative interpretations. Miracle stories are employed as powerful tools for creating emotional dependence. These supernatural accounts are presented in a way that reinforces organizational authority, while creating a sense of wonder and awe. The simplified presentation makes these extraordinary claims seem natural and unquestionable to young minds. The triumphal entry narrative is reshaped to emphasize absolute loyalty. The story creates clear expectations of unwavering dedication to religious authority, using emotional appeals and simplified reasoning to make complete submission seem both natural and desirable to young readers. The Last Supper account is transformed into a powerful tool for establishing guilt-based control. The narrative creates deep emotional connections while reinforcing organizational authority through ritual. The story's presentation makes complex religious obligations seem natural and necessary for young readers. The crucifixion narrative represents perhaps the most intense emotional manipulation in the book. The story and imagery are carefully crafted to create lasting emotional impressions on young minds, establishing deep-seated feelings of obligation and guilt that reinforce organizational control. Throughout this analysis, we've seen consistent patterns of emotional manipulation, authority reinforcement, and fear-based control. The book's approach to children's religious education reveals sophisticated techniques for shaping young minds, from leveraging natural trust and imagination to establishing early patterns of unquestioning acceptance. These methods demonstrate how religious literature can be crafted to create lasting psychological impacts on young readers.